September 11th, 1970. Dawn, Dak To, South Vietnam. Captain Eugene McCarley stood on the tarmac watching helicopters being loaded with ammunition, medical supplies, and body bags. Lots of body bags. He commanded a hatchet force, a company-sized element of Green Berets and Montagnard commandos from MAC VSOG, the most classified special operations unit in the Vietnam War. His mission was simple on paper. Insert 60 miles inside Laos, hit an enemy base camp, and extract. But McCarley knew the truth. This wasn't a standard raid. The target was 20 miles beyond SOG's authorized area of operations. The enemy presence in that region was massive. Thousands of North Vietnamese troops moving along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And the intelligence suggested something darker, something the Pentagon would never officially acknowledge. American defectors. U.S. soldiers who'd abandoned their units crossed enemy lines and were now living with the North Vietnamese in a base camp deep in the Laotian jungle. The mission? Kill them. At 7:30 a.m., 16 Americans and 110 Montagnard commandos lifted off in a formation of helicopters. They disappeared into the mountains, heading toward one of the most heavily defended areas in Southeast Asia. What happened over the next 4 days would become one of the most controversial special operations missions in American history. A mission the Pentagon investigated, denied, and buried. A mission where veterans claim nerve gas was used to save their lives. A mission targeting American soldiers. This is Operation Tailwind, the mission the Pentagon refuses to acknowledge, and the war crime they've been covering up for over 50 years. To understand Operation Tailwind, you need to understand MAC VSOG, Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. The name was deliberately bland, bureaucratic, forgettable. But SOG wasn't studying anything. They were conducting the most dangerous special operations missions of the Vietnam War. Cross-border raids into Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam. Countries where the United States officially had no military presence. Missions that were designed to be deniable. If you were captured, the US government would claim you were never there. If you died, your family would be told you fell in South Vietnam, not across the border where you actually were. Your service records would be falsified, your after-action reports rewritten, everything classified. By September 1970, the war was going badly. President Nixon had promised Vietnamization, turning the war over to South Vietnamese forces so American troops could withdraw. But the North Vietnamese weren't cooperating. They were flooding the Ho Chi Minh Trail with troops, weapons, and supplies. The CIA launched Operation Honorable Dragon, a covert campaign to cut North Vietnamese supply lines in southern Laos. As part of that operation, SOG was asked to conduct a raid near Chavan, deep inside enemy territory. The target, a North Vietnamese base camp that served as a rest area for troops moving south along the trail. Intelligence reports suggested the camp housed hundreds of enemy soldiers. And possibly something else, something the US military didn't want anyone to know about. American deserters. Throughout the Vietnam War, thousands of US soldiers went AWOL, absent without leave. Most returned to their units or were captured in South Vietnam. But some, a handful, reportedly crossed into enemy territory and defected to the North Vietnamese or Viet Cong. The Pentagon has never officially acknowledged how many Americans defected. The numbers are classified, but SOG operators knew They'd heard the stories. Radio intercepts mentioning American advisors working with the North Vietnamese. Interrogation reports from captured enemy soldiers describing tall English-speaking men living in base camps. And now intelligence suggested a group of defectors was sheltering in the Chavan region, living with the enemy, providing tactical advice, maybe even fighting against their former countrymen. Captain McCarley was told his mission included denying the enemy a rest and recuperation facility, standard military jargon for destroying a base camp. What he wasn't told, officially, was that his team was being sent to execute American citizens. September 11th, 1970, 8 a.m. McCarley's force landed in a valley 60 miles inside Laos. The helicopters dropped them in waves, Americans first, then Montagnard troops. They moved quickly toward the target, a base camp nestled in the jungle. As they approached, something strange happened. The camp was quiet, too quiet. No guards, no defensive positions, no sign of the hundreds of enemy troops intelligence had reported. Then the Air Force A-1 Sky Raiders arrived overhead. Single-engine attack aircraft, slow and low-flying, designed for close air support. The planes made their bombing runs, dropping cluster munitions on the camp. But these weren't standard bombs. According to multiple veterans who participated in the mission, the munitions produced white clouds that drifted across the camp. A gas, not smoke from explosions. Gas. Within minutes, the SOG team entered the camp. What they found was horrifying. Bodies everywhere, North Vietnamese soldiers, women, children, all dead or incapacitated. Not from shrapnel or blast injuries, from asphyxiation, chemical exposure. Robert Van Buskirk, one of the American soldiers on the raid, later described throwing grenades into huts filled with people who'd already been gassed, turning already gassed and quiescent inhabitants into raw meat, as one account described it. The team searched the camp. They found 800 pages of documents, intelligence materials, code books, communication logs, evidence that this wasn't just a rest camp, it was a command center. And then, according to Van Buskirk's testimony, he saw something that would haunt him forever. In one of the underground tunnels beneath the camp, he glimpsed a tall, blond man, an American. Van Buskirk threw a grenade into the tunnel. The entrance collapsed. When the team dug through the rubble later, they found bodies. At least 2 of them appeared to be American soldiers. The raid had accomplished its mission. The camp was destroyed. The defectors were dead. The intelligence materials were secured. But before McCarley's team could extract, everything went wrong. North Vietnamese reinforcements arrived faster than anyone expected. Hundreds of troops, maybe thousands, pouring down the Ho Chi Minh Trail from nearby bases, responding to the sounds of battle. The SOG team was trapped. They'd planned for a quick raid, hit the target, grab the intelligence, extract within hours. But now they were pinned down by overwhelming enemy forces. Artillery fire from nearby ridges, machine gun positions blocking their escape routes, mortar rounds falling among the landing zones where helicopters were supposed to pick them up. The battle lasted 80 hours, 3 days and nights of continuous combat. Nearly every American was wounded. Many of the Montagnard commandos were killed. Medical supplies ran low, ammunition ran low. They were outnumbered at least 100 to 1, possibly more. And that's when According to the veterans who were there, the gas came back. On September 12th, the second day of the battle, Air Force Sky Raiders returned. Again, they dropped cluster munition that produced white clouds. This time, the gas fell on North Vietnamese troops attacking the SOG team's position. Within minutes, the enemy assault slowed, stopped. The North Vietnamese soldiers who'd been charging forward moments earlier were now stumbling, falling, gasping for air. The gas gave the SOG team time to organize a fighting withdrawal toward the landing zones. On September 14th, after 3 days of brutal combat, the surviving team members were finally extracted by helicopter. All 16 Americans survived, though every single one had been wounded. Approximately 60 Montagnards died in the battle. Captain McCarley and Lieutenant Van Buskirk both received the Silver Star for valor. Van Buskirk personally briefed General Crichton Abrams, the top U.S. commander in Vietnam, on the mission. But when he wrote his after-action report, a superior officer advised him to delete certain details. Specifically, the part about the American defectors. The part about throwing grenades on U.S. citizens in the tunnel. Those details were classified, buried, erased from official records. And for nearly 30 years, Operation Tailwind remained a secret. June 7th, 1998, CNN headquarters, Atlanta. The network aired a special investigative report titled Valley of Death, produced by April Oliver and Jack Smith, narrated by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Peter Arnett. The report made 2 explosive allegations. First, that the United States had used sarin nerve gas, one of the deadliest chemical weapons ever created, during Operation Tailwind. Not tear gas, not smoke grenades. Sarin, the same agent used in the 1995 Tokyo subway terrorist attack that killed 12 people. Second, that the mission's primary purpose was to hunt down and execute American defectors living with the North Vietnamese. The report was based on 8 months of investigation, over 200 interviews, testimony from SOG veterans who participated in the raid, and most importantly, confirmation from Admiral Thomas Moorer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1970. Moorer appeared on camera and stated that nerve gas had been used during Tailwind, that it was by and large available for high-risk rescue missions, that the U.S. had employed sarin in more than 20 missions to rescue downed pilots in Laos and North Vietnam. He also confirmed, according to the producers, that American defectors had been targeted. The broadcast was a bombshell. If true, it meant the United States had committed war crimes, used banned chemical weapons, executed its own citizens without trial. The Pentagon immediately denied everything. Within days, Secretary of Defense William Cohen launched an investigation. The military reviewed classified documents, interviewed personnel, examined after-action reports. On July 21, 1998, 6 weeks after the CNN broadcast, Cohen announced the findings. No document mentions pursuit of U.S. defectors as Tailwind's mission. While sarin was stored in Okinawa in 1970, we found no evidence sarin nerve gas was ever sent to or used in Vietnam or Laos. The Pentagon's position was clear. CNN had gotten it wrong. The gas used was tear gas, a CN/CS mixture, not nerve gas. The mission targeted enemy supply lines, not American defectors. CNN launched its own internal investigation led by media attorney Floyd Abrams. His conclusion: the story cannot be supported. On July 2, 1998, CNN retracted the report. apologized, fired producers April Oliver and Jack Smith. Peter Arnett was reprimanded, case closed, mission denied, allegations dismissed. Except the veterans who were there, many of them still insist the story was true. Here's what we know for certain. Operation Tailwind happened. On September 11th to 14th, 1970, a SOG hatchet force raided a North Vietnamese base camp 60 miles inside Laos. They fought an 80-hour battle against overwhelming enemy forces. All 16 Americans survived. Approximately 60 Montagnards died. Chemical agents were used. The Pentagon admits tear gas was deployed during the extraction. Multiple witnesses, both American and Montagnard, reported seeing white clouds that incapacitated enemy forces. But was it sarin or tear gas? The Pentagon says tear gas. Admiral Moorer, before his statements were disputed, said sarin. Multiple SOG veterans say sarin, but the classified records that would prove it definitively remain sealed. Were American defectors targeted? The Pentagon says no. The mission was to disrupt enemy supply lines, nothing more. But Robert Van Buskirk wrote a book about Tailwind. In it, he described seeing a tall, blond man in the tunnel. He described throwing a grenade that killed him. He described bodies that appeared to be American. And when he wrote his official after-action report in 1970, a superior officer told him to delete that section. To remove any mention of killing Americans, why would they tell him to delete it if it didn't happen? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Chemical agents were used. Probably tear gas, possibly something stronger during the extraction when American lives were at risk. The mission likely had a secondary objective involving defectors, though perhaps not as the primary goal. But we'll never know for certain, because the records remain classified, because the witnesses have died or been discredited, because the Pentagon investigated itself and declared itself innocent. Today, Operation Tailwind is remembered, if it's remembered at all, as a CNN scandal, a case of irresponsible journalism, a story that couldn't be proven. But ask the veterans who were there. Ask Robert Van Buskirk. Ask the Montagnard commandos who survived. Ask the families of the 60 men who died in that valley. They'll tell you something happened in Laos in September 1970. Something the Pentagon doesn't want to acknowledge. Something darker than a standard combat operation. Maybe it was nerve gas, maybe it was just tear gas, maybe defectors were targeted, maybe they weren't. But the fact that the Pentagon's first response to the CNN report wasn't, "Here are the declassified records that prove you wrong." The fact that most Operation Tailwind documents remain classified 55 years later. The fact that witnesses were told to delete sections of their reports. That tells you everything you need to know. This wasn't a normal mission. This was something the US government wants buried, hidden, denied. Operation Tailwind, the mission the Pentagon refuses to acknowledge, and the war crime they've been covering up for over half a century. If this story makes you question what else the Pentagon is hiding, if you believe those SOG veterans deserve to have their accounts taken seriously, if you think classified missions shouldn't be immune from accountability, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories like this, more missions that were denied, more operations buried in classified files, more truths that powerful institutions don't want you to know. The secret war in Laos killed thousands, and the Pentagon is still keeping most of it classified. We're going to expose every mission, one declassified document at a time.